road to global war, 1919 to 1939. World War II did not erupt suddenly in September 1939. It was a catastrophic result of unresolved tensions, political failures, economic collapse, and ideological extremism that followed the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to secure lasting peace, yet it instead planted the seeds of another global conflict. Germany was humiliated, stripped of territory, forced to accept full blame for the war, and burdened with crushing reparations that shattered its economy and national pride. Hyperinflation destroyed savings, unemployment soared, and faith in democratic institutions collapsed. In this atmosphere of despair and anger, radical ideologies flourished. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited German resentment, promising national revival, military strength, and revenge against perceived enemies, including Jews, communists, and Western powers. Meanwhile, Italy, dissatisfied with its post-war gains, fell under the rule of Benito Mussolini, who promoted fascism and imperial expansion as a cure for national weakness. Across Europe, democracy struggled to survive as authoritarian regimes rose, fueled by fear of communism and economic instability caused by the Great Depression of 1929, which devastated global markets and intensified nationalist rivalries. The League of Nations, established to prevent future wars, proved powerless, lacking enforcement mechanisms and unity among major powers. Japan, facing resource shortages and economic strain, turned toward militarism and expansion, invading Manchuria in 1931, and later launching full-scale war against China in 1937, committing atrocities such as the Nanjing Massacre. Western powers, exhausted by World War I and desperate to avoid another conflict, adopted policies of appeasement, allowing aggression to go largely unchecked. Hitler violated the Treaty of Versailles by rebuilding Germany's military, remilitarizing the Rhineland, annexing Austria in the Anschluss of 1938, and demanding the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. The Munich Agreement symbolized appeasement's failure, sacrificing Czechoslovakia in exchange for empty promises of peace. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, using blitzkrieg tactics of rapid, coordinated assaults with tanks, aircraft, and infantry, Britain and France finally declared war. Yet even then, few fully grasped that the world was entering the most destructive conflict in human history, one that would consume continents, redefine warfare, and reshape civilization itself. A World in Flames, 1939 to 1943. The early years of World War II were marked by astonishing speed, devastating defeats, and shocking brutality. Germany's blitzkrieg strategy overwhelmed Poland in weeks, then turned westward in 1940, crushing Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France with terrifying efficiency. Paris fell, and Europe stood stunned as Nazi banners flew over conquered capitals. Britain, isolated yet defiant, faced relentless aerial bombardment during the Battle of Britain, where the Royal Air Force resisted the German Luftwaffe in the first major conflict fought entirely in the skies, marking Hitler's first significant failure. As Europe burned, the war expanded into North Africa, where German General Erwin Rommel battled Allied forces for control of strategic supply routes and oil resources. In June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, turning against his former ally, the Soviet Union. Millions of soldiers clashed across vast landscapes as German forces advanced deep into Soviet territory, surrounding entire armies and causing unimaginable casualties. Yet the invasion exposed the limits of Nazi power. Harsh winters, overstretched supply lines, and fierce Soviet resistance halted the German advance outside Moscow and later at Stalingrad, where brutal urban combat turned the city into ruins soaked with blood. On another front, the war took a dramatic turn on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, drawing the United States into the conflict. The war instantly became truly global. Japanese forces swept across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, capturing territories at breathtaking speed, while the U.S. and its allies struggled to regroup. The Pacific War was marked by ferocious naval battles, island-hopping campaigns, and a level of savagery driven by racial hatred and military fanaticism. Civilians suffered immensely across all theaters of war. Nazi occupation policies included mass executions, forced labor, and systematic genocide. The Holocaust unfolded with industrial efficiency as 6 million Jews, along with Roma, disabled individuals, political prisoners, and others, were murdered in concentration and extermination camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Entire communities vanished, leaving scars that would never heal. By 1943, the tide of war began to shift. The German defeat at Stalingrad shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility, while Allied victories at El Alamein in North Africa and Midway in Pacific signaled a turning point. The world was still engulfed in violence, but for the first time, hope flickered amid the devastation. Victory, destruction, and a new world order, 1943 to 1945. The final phase of World War II was defined by relentless Allied offensives, unprecedented destruction, and the total collapse of the Axis powers. In Europe, Allied forces landed in Italy, overthrowing Mussolini's regime, and then launched a historic D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, storming the beaches of Normandy in one of the largest amphibious operations ever conducted. Despite fierce German resistance, the Allies broke through, liberating France and pushing steadily toward Germany from the west, while the Soviet Red Army advanced from the east, reclaiming occupied territories at a staggering human cost. Cities were reduced to rubble as strategic bombing campaigns devastated industrial centers and civilian populations alike. The Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major offensive in the West, failed, sealing the fate of the Third Reich. As Soviet troops closed in on Berlin, evidence of the Holocaust shocked the world, revealing the full horror of Nazi crimes. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide, and Germany surrendered shortly afterward, bringing the war in Europe to an end. Yet the conflict raged on in the Pacific, where Allied forces fought their way toward Japan through brutal battles at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, encountering fierce resistance and devastating casualties. Fearing that a land invasion of Japan would cost millions of lives, the United States made a decision that would forever alter history: the use of atomic weapons. In August 1945, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, instantly killing tens of thousands and causing long-term suffering through radiation exposure. Japan surrendered shortly thereafter, ending World War II. The war left more than 70 million people dead, entire nations shattered, and moral questions that still haunt humanity. In its aftermath, the world sought to rebuild and prevent such destruction from happening again. The United Nations was established to promote international cooperation, while war crimes trials at Nuremberg and Tokyo attempted to bring justice to those responsible for atrocities. Yet new tensions emerged as the wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union collapsed into ideological rivalry, giving rise to the Cold War. World War II reshaped borders, accelerated technological and social change, and redefined global power, leaving a legacy of both progress and pain. It stands as a solemn reminder of the consequences of hatred, unchecked ambition, and silence in the face of injustice. A war that forever changed the course of human history.
Communists and socialists wanted to concentrate on winning a military victory. But the more idealistic anarchists and syndicalists saw the war as an opportunity for a mass revolution by the workers. These disagreements burst out into the open in May 1937. Fighting broke out in Barcelona between the anarchists and communists. It was a fatal weakening of the Republican cause. By the end of 1938, the nationalists had penned their enemy into a small enclave around Barcelona, and another stretching eastward from Madrid to the coast. As his forces closed in for the final assault on Madrid. At the end of March 1939, its defenders, exhausted after nearly 3 years of fighting, the capital finally surrendered. A month later, Franco formally declared hostilities at an end. The scars of Spain's civil war took years to heal, and in some ways, they never have. And internationally, Franco's victory over the Republic proved a disaster. Hitler and Mussolini were confirmed in their belief that the democracies of Britain and France were impotent to resist any real pressure, while Stalin despaired of their willingness to confront fascism. Hitler in particular saw his way open to begin the aggressive policies outlined in Mein Kampf. Even before the Spanish Civil War ended, his armies were on the march. From the moment he became Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933, Hitler had begun to put his long-term ambitions into action. On February 3rd, he told his top commanders that his ultimate aim was to conquer territory in the East and ruthlessly Germanize it. They were instructed to prepare for a massive expansion. Although Germany had been forbidden tanks, a secret treaty with the Soviet Union in 1923 had allowed the development of tank designs and experimentation with new mobile armored tactics. Energetic young German officers like Heinz Guderian read the theories of British thinkers like Basil Liddell Hart and Colonel John Fuller. They even watched exercises being carried out by the British during the 1920s on Salisbury Plain. It was from these that they came up with the idea of fast-moving units combining tanks, artillery, and infantry that could thrust fast and deep into enemy territory. Hitler adopted their ideas with enthusiasm. The new army was to have 3 panzer divisions. Similarly, the new Air Force, the Luftwaffe, under former World War I fighter ace Hermann Göring, had had a framework to build on. Throughout the years in which its Air Force was officially banned, Germany had kept up its design skills by building civilian machines, and gliding and flying clubs provided a reserve of potential aircrew. Hitler revealed the existence of the Luftwaffe in March 1935. He then announced that the army was to be increased to 300,000 men and conscription was reintroduced. Britain and France protested feebly at this flagrant breach of the Versailles Treaty. But soon they reluctantly and slowly began to rearm. Until this point, Hitler had been modest in his goals. He had only taken back what was his, the Rhineland and Saarland. But now he had a grander target in mind, his homeland, Austria. In 1934, Austrian Nazis had attempted to seize power and unify the country with Germany. The Austrians, after all, spoke German, even if they had never been part of a German state. In February 1938, another Nazi plot was discovered. Austrian Chancellor Kurt von Schuschnigg protested to Hitler. Hitler responded by demanding that Austria stop mistreating the Austrian Nazis and unite with Germany.
Die Jugend ist uns verschrieben und verfallen mit Leib und mit Seele.
Schuschnigg promptly called a referendum so that the Austrians could vote on whether to remain independent. But on March the 12th, 1938, the eve of the referendum, Hitler, fearing that it might produce the wrong result, sent in his troops. Complete surprise and an enthusiastic welcome by Nazi sympathizers made it a bloodless invasion. Within hours, Hitler announced Austria's incorporation into the Third Reich. A sovereign nation had, for the first time, been subsumed into a greater Germany. Once again, the Western democracies failed to react. In the summer of 1938, he turned on his next prey, Czechoslovakia. A substantial German minority lived in the northwest of the country, an area known as the Sudetenland. These Sudeten Germans had been part of the old Austrian Empire, but had been cut off when Czechoslovakia was created in 1919. This was the time bomb that had started ticking at the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler encouraged Sudeten German demands for autonomy and then threatened the Czech government with force if it refused to agree. Undaunted, the Czech government ordered general mobilization and prepared to resist. The Czechoslovak army was large and well-equipped, with formidable fortifications on its frontier with Germany. Hitler backed off. But then at the beginning of September, concerned that war might be imminent, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain decided to act as a peacemaker. He flew to meet Hitler twice. The Nazi dictator assured him that if he could have the Sudetenland, he would make no further territorial demands in Europe. In Munich, on September the 29th, 1938, with Mussolini acting as mediator, France and Britain signed an agreement giving the Sudetenland to Germany in return for a formal declaration by Hitler that he had no more territorial ambitions. Chamberlain flew back to Britain waving the piece of paper which he claimed guarantees peace in our time. And so, on October the 1st, German troops occupied the Sudetenland and seized the Czech frontier fortifications. Hitler now began sizing up his next target, Poland.
Eine große Nation muss dauernd zusehen, wie gegen Recht und vertragliche Bestimmungen Angehörige des Blutes.
Again, the nominal cause was a German minority marooned as a result of the Versailles Treaty.
Also normalen Staatenverbrecher.
Hitler demanded the return of the port of Danzig to German control, so that East Prussia could be linked up with the rest of Germany. The Poles refused, and Hitler hesitated. He was not quite ready for all-out war, and he had unfinished business with Czechoslovakia. In March 1939, the eastern part of the country, Slovakia, which was ethnically different to the Czech lands, appealed to Hitler for help in achieving greater independence. Hitler summoned the Czechoslovak Prime Minister Emil Hácha to Berlin and browbeat him into putting his country under German protection. German troops now marched into the rest of Czechoslovakia, unopposed. Most of the country was annexed into the Reich. Slovakia was declared a protectorate. For the first time, Hitler had seized non-German-speaking territory. But again, there was only a feeble protest from Britain and France. At the end of March, he again repeated his demand that Poland give up Danzig. This time, France and Britain declared unequivocally that they would declare war if he attacked Poland. But by now, Hitler cared little whether they did or not. He was sure that they would be weak and indecisive opponents. In Russia, Stalin had also become increasingly concerned by Hitler's aggression. In April, Stalin proposed an alliance with Britain and France. But negotiations made little progress. And finally Stalin despaired, deciding that there was another solution to the German threat. On August the 23rd, the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, who everyone had believed were sworn enemies, announced a non-aggression pact. The agreement secretly specified that Poland would be split between the two countries, and Stalin would have a free hand to take over Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now free from any Russian threat, Hitler ordered his armed forces to prepare for an immediate invasion. On the evening of August the 31st, the German Wehrmacht prepared for the assault. Its Führer had made the decision which would plunge the world into war.